What's up, guys? Welcome to KP Community. As you can tell tonight, I am running solo. No Garrett. Garrett's out for the week, so I'm going to be taking care of all of our KP Community night as a solo host. So with that being said, a lot of stuff on the list tonight to run through. I'm really excited about some of the videos we have this week. We got our series How To. We also have our series Under the Hood. I'm going to be bringing you guys some insights. One of the big focus for us this week was to bring you guys insights on really how to work through our training, especially with the off season coming up for many of you. So let's jump in tonight, jump into our How To series. This week, got a chance to sit down with Garrett. And we had a nice conversation about foam rolling. What is foam rolling? How does foam rolling work? So it's How To. The series this week is How To Foam Roll. Let's check it out. So, dude,
what's up?
Not much. Today we're talking about foam rolling. First question we have is foam rolling good for you?
Yes and no.
Yes and no?
Yes.
Okay. So, why is foam rolling good for you? Let's start there.
So, foam rolling is great because it gives you the perception of not being tight. And if someone comes in tight, it allows them to be able to train in a state that they feel really good in.
From the way I'm understanding it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's foam rolling gives you the ability to feel where you need to feel, the way you need to feel, right? Loosen up or prepared for the day to actually train mobility. So foam rolling itself does not actually create mobility.
No, foam rolling does not actually change a mobility issue. All it does is it gives us the ability to do things that we wouldn't have without it.
So when we talk about like the IT band, like I see a lot of guys like rolling on their side, right? Like they roll out their quad first and they'll go to their IT band. Like from what I'm hearing, like that idea of rolling that muscle, rolling that body point, we're not actually really accomplishing any physical change. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it doesn't give us enough stimulus on the body to actually create that change that real training actually does.
Gotcha. So we need a higher stimulus or a higher change or a higher load, basically,
yes,
to be able to actually apply change. So we can't induce that type of load through a foam roller, basically, put the type of pressure into that spot to create that. Okay, that makes sense. So what about other modalities? I know you have like I've seen guys with cross balls or like the like Taylor guns, right? So. Are those one and the same? It seems like if it's a loading issue, that those are going to apply the same or have the same problem. Right?
Yeah. So anything that's a passive modality like foam rolling, anything or the Theragun, things like that, all it does is it changes the perception of how you feel. Then coming into the weight room and having a very structured program to fix those limitations is where the real change happens. But a lot of people think, oh, I foam rolled because I got more range of motion because I foam rolled. No, you got better range of motion, mobility through the training, but the foam roller was a path that got you to that training to actually create real change.
They prepared you for it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. So how would a guy, we have all this application now, we know there's a feeling of foam rolling, right? And we know that there's an actual application of like training to make that stimulus become actual change. Like if we have a range of motion issue, we change that by training it, right? Go through that process and why we would use a foam roller, the structure which we would use a foam roller to prepare for that training stimulus.
Yeah, so with the foam roller, it's going to be the first thing because we want to change the perception. Next, it would be mobility. So this would be where your normal stretching would come into play. So right after the foam roller would be a stretching. So let's take a hip issue, for example. Something like an elevated pigeon pose, stretching. Then something into stability. So stability exercise, something like a single leg RDL, unloaded, just to feel that internal rotation, the stability of it. And then being able to load those hips in something like a lunge. We know with the lunge, we can go barbell, we can do dumbbell, we can do multiple different things to add load. This is where we can then create that real change is in the lunges, but there's multiple steps to get the most out of that lunge. And basically once you do the lunge, you basically just keep going through that process until change has occurred.
So basically the foam roller itself does not fully change the red flag or the issue you would see from assessment in terms of like if it's a mobility issue, right? So we have foam roller, that'd be the start. We move to the mobility component of it, the stability, the strength component of it, to actually see change applied to a certain issue that we may have or a red flag in an assessment. So I think that's it. We concluded on that.
Yep.
Anything to add?
No.
Awesome. Cool. Throwing it back to the booth. Appreciate it, Garrett. It's funny, isn't it? Like, you know, I look at that video, and Garrett and I kind of had a good laugh this week. You know, that the how-to this week was actually prompted by a question. We had a young guy came in and asked us, you know, why do we foam roll, and how do I best foam roll? Because, you know, we showed him, hey, this is something we want you to do to start our session off. We gave him some soft tissue stuff to kind of work through, but it was funny, you know, we both kind of stepped back and, you know, how do we explain this down that it's just a feel thing? You know, there's so many modalities. He had seen something online, this athlete had seen something online that led him to believe that, you know, using a Theragun or a foam roller or a lacrosse ball, you know, he was going to buy a product that was promoting mobility. But, you know, when we actually dive deeper into it, we start to read about this stuff, and we don't just take marketing for face value. We start to actually, you know, ask the hard questions. You know, why am I doing this? What is this actually benefiting? We start to kind of find the nuances of, you know, like what Garrett's talking about, that, you know, foam rolling, while it's important because it you know, in our process, it can help us feel better to actually achieve the training focus for the day. It's not actually necessarily creating a change in that training focus for the day. So I love that how-to. It's a great video. If you guys, you know, we'll have this up on YouTube, have this up we'll pop this up on Instagram as well, so you guys can review it, re-see it. Those of you that are with us as members, obviously you guys have access to Coop. You guys can see it in Coop at any time. But this video, you know, it's just a great refresh to understand a couple basic things. That is, you know, foam rolling in itself, in and of itself, is not the thing that's going to bring change to mobility if you're red flagged in a certain area. But it can help us feel better to get the most out of our training, to make sure that we're applying applicable change at that time to actually change something that we need to change. So love that. And guys, you know, we want you guys asking great questions like that. So, you know, part of our series here at the end, as you see, we have our AMA coming up at the end of the day. If you guys have questions, pop them into the chat box, whether you're with us at KP or you're outside of KP. You know, we opened this up today for the first time to the public on Instagram. You guys can watch this now live via Instagram in our link tree in our bio. So check that out, but pop some questions in. If you guys have questions, throw them in the chat box at the end today, or the AMA will actually answer those questions for you and try to give you some feedback on training questions that you might have. Going into our next segment tonight, we're going to move into what we call Under the Hood. So let's pop that up. Under the Hood. Under the Hood is just an idea of, you know, what drives KP? What is the engine that drives KP? What's our philosophy? So like last week we talked about Inside the Metrics was one of our segments. And we obviously went into some other aspects of explaining the metrics that we use at KP. This is more around our philosophy. This is not something that's necessarily deeply, you know, ingrained in research. This has all been influenced heavily by research, but you know, this is not the end-all, be-all aspect. This is just a lot of the philosophy that underpins, you know, why we train athletes the way we do. You know, gives us a backbone to saying, hey, this is the process we want you to go through. So let's pop into Under the Hood real quick, and I'm going to give you guys a little detail on our throwing process tonight and explain a little bit about how we structure micro, macro cycles through the year in our. So let's hit it. Boom. So as you guys see on the screen tonight, we have a couple things. This is really, we're going to be talking about like what an off season looks like. So for many of you guys, you're going through a full off season right now. You're preparing yourselves for, you know, a 2-month or a 3-month build, 4-month build to season. Many of you guys are coming out of fall right now, questioning, you know, do I take some time off? Do I deload? Do I build up a little bit more here? Do I focus on maybe, a velocity phase and do a velocity phase? There's so much that goes into it, but the first thing that we have to do before we start diving into workloads and planning a velo phase and all this, we have to really start to think about the long term. What's our goal? And so we kind of start back from the top. So what you're going to see here is basically a cycle. And this is to get us into season. This starts us from the beginning of an off season, takes us all the way into a season. And so what we're doing here is, number one, you're going to see our first focus with you from a throwing standpoint at KP is going to be our movement. And so what we want to do, we look at the load that you're going to be under during this period of time, right? So let's say you take a couple weeks off. We're talking about kind of a pro off season here. Let's say you take a couple weeks off and you're now building back up. You're getting ready for what's ahead. We want to really focus heavy on movement quality. So that means, number one, in that first month, we're going to start building mobility, stability, and strength. We want to evaluate those things. We want to assess those things. It's time to put our body, if there's anything that's coming out of a season that may not be healthy, we want to fix that right out of the jump before we start our off season. Make sure that we're going into the back half of our off season healthy, prepared for what's ahead. So a lot of times, especially with our pro guys, this is that area where we look at, we say, okay, mobility, stability, and strength. Where are you lacking? How do we assess you? Let's get you physically right in that first month. This also comes down to our pitching biomechanics. So, we want to assess you. This is, again, part of that assessment process is our biomechanics component. We use ProPlay AI at our facility to evaluate our athletes, which means that we can do one of two things. One, we can take video that you had from in season, and we can evaluate exactly how you were moving at your peak in season. So if you can get open side video, slow motion in season, that gives us such good insight as to where to start with making adjustments or even, trying to establish where you were at your best in season. And so we start to kind of lay out a plan based upon those biomechanics. But let's say you don't get a chance to get that open side video in season, no big deal. This is where we encourage an exit pin. So the exit pin from the season would be, you finish your season, you come in and you finish your season. Basically, you stay hot throwing wise. You come to KP, you throw one bullpen, and then we shut you down. That one bullpen will be kind of your baseline in preparation for what's ahead for the season, or for the off season. So we'll use that open side video that we take at that time as your biomechanics reference point to try to get you to either change some things or maybe just try to get back to that place that you were. So we use that for our pitching biomechanics. And then from there, we establish, like it says here, our specific drills in preparation of movement. So we're just trying to create a really good movement base. So we have the macro cycle, which is like it could be the entire off season, or it could be an entire year's plan. It's a long-term plan, right? Then we have the micro cycles, which are kind of these inner working small pieces of this plan. So in this case, our first micro cycle here, we're talking about movement. We're talking about movement quality. We want to focus, put a precedent. We're building up, so we're focusing in on the movement quality of this point. But then once we move in past that, so that's usually about the first month. After that, we're looking at output. And then we start to the output is not like a velo phase. The output is we're starting to gain intensity. We're starting to build intensity. This is like 70% to 100% intensity. We're starting to really elevate twice a week your one-day workload values, and starting to really try to gain an understanding of how our body's moving at its highest speed. So we try to build that piece, try to take what we've learned from movement quality, try to replicate that now, bring that to our overall output. So we want to see what we do in that first month really impact and affect that second month. So we can do some baselines. If we want to do some plyo velos or we want to do some mound velos, it's okay. But it's not quite the run and gun format or heavy velocity phase. It's just falling underneath that still progressing workload at that time. This is a focus of, again, long toss, plyo velo, pin velo, kind of the main components there. After that, we're talking about a month 3 or a phase 3, again, a micro cycle, phase 3. We're talking about pitch design. So this would be where we start to really look into our ball flight data. We start to really look into high-speed video from our Chronos camera. We start to look at pitch profiling and start to try to evaluate, how do you stack up? What are some things we can do with your pitches? So we've gone through movement now. We've looked at your mechanics. We've looked at the movement qualities that make you what you are. We've built up that intensity around that movement. Now it starts to kind of lean to compete with that movement. So we're now getting into ball flight data. We're looking at some high-speed video, like I said, that pitch profiling, understanding how your stuff works. And we're starting to look ahead to now where the competition component of this is, which is we're going to compete. That's our 4th microcycle and our last before season. So we're going to push players into looking at pin metrics. How well did you command the baseball? today. That's one thing that often gets really overlooked in this, right? We don't take into account the measures that we're going to have to undersee in season. We also want to now see in this competition phase. So we can do live at bats, or you know, in some cases we just jump right into that early inter squad seasonal play. This is where we really want to still measure things and kind of move up from our pitch design. You know, how's my stuff actually profiling against hitters? This is my first time to really see that. You know, you might go through a pitch design cycle and realize that that pitch just isn't for you against hitters. It profiles great, but it maybe just isn't the right pitch. So this is where you start to figure that out in that competition phase, and we go from there. So let's break this down even just a touch further. We're going to kind of get into, again, how we build this out, maybe what technologies we're going to use with this as well. So again, output, our focus is with long toss, plyo velo, and pin velo. You know, again, our focus here is just to try to up the intent. And so you see that word here right in the second line there. It's high volume, or it's volume of high intent throwing. So we're trying to accumulate that slowly and appropriately. And so one of the things I really want to point out here in this phase is that we use long toss, but we can use long toss in two different ways if we wanted to, right? We look at long toss as moving back, using the distance as an external factor to drive intensity. Or if you're not somebody who likes to long toss, we don't mind you throwing shorter. We want to up the output, meaning that we're going to use a radar gun, and we're going to use some more objective measure to start to kind of evaluate how you create output. So that is our output phase. Let's move on to, again, next one here. We're going to go, sorry, movement phase should have been first. But we're going to use, this is what I really like to see about the movement phase. I want to just address some technologies here that we use here. So for our assessment component, we have our range of motion screen with the Modus ROM MX. We have our VBT. In biomechanics, we have ProPlay AI and slow motion video. And in drill work, we have our KP app, which is coming out. But as many of you guys know, that's in facility, us passing that along in reports. So for those of you that are not part of KP, those of you that are part of KP, some of the big pieces that I want you guys to take out of this is just to understand we have to measure these components. We have to manage these. What gets measured gets mastered. We want to be able to go through this and evaluate, am I getting better, right? So if I assess in month one, looking to next year, going into an off season, what does that assessment look like again in that month one? What does month one and month two look like in terms of assessment comparative? Those are things that we want to jump into. Pitch design, you know, same thing here. We have, in our case, we have our TrackMan. We have Baseball Savant that we'll lean on for a lot of data. We have Chronos for our camera. And again, we'll look at the KP app for pitch profiling, understanding where you best fit. And then lastly here, as we go into the competition phase, again, same thing. We'll use TrackMan for the seasonal play. Use Baseball Savant TrackMan for player in-pin metrics. Then live at bat, same thing, slow motion camera with ProPlay AI. And we'll use TrackMan as well for that on the field. So hopefully this brings some clarity to you guys around what it is that we are trying to accomplish in terms of macro cycles, meaning the long term, like it could be an entire off season, versus the micro cycles, which would be providing the singular point of focus for a single phase in the off season. So for some of you guys that are looking to that, obviously, you know, guys at KP, I want you guys to look at and address those components of your off season accordingly. You know, as you guys move into the movement phase, which many of you are starting, you know, in the next couple weeks, really have a baseline of focus. You know, talk to our staff and make sure you understand what it is exactly that you're focused on the first couple weeks of your movement phase, and let's build it from there. Let's have a great off season in doing that. So with that being said, moving back over now, we're going to be going to our AMA section. Hopefully, again, if you guys have any questions on the cycles, if you guys have questions on foam rolling or other questions that are just general, we want you guys to throw this in the chat. You guys are welcome to apply those questions into the chat, and we will answer them for you. Got a couple questions this week. We'll keep it short this week. We'll open it up with a fun one. Transitioning here to ABCA. Brady, Dat Dude. I don't even know what that says. Oh, not number one. I know that that's Brady Burgess. So Brady, appreciate you shooting in a question this week. Brady asked, where does Climb the Mountain come from? And that's a great question. I think a lot of you guys know that, I founded the company back in 2017 and had a lot of really cool interests, a lot of guys that kind of started up. And one of our mantras back in 2017, 2018 was this term, climb the mountain. And the idea was that we were handwriting data. So this is kind of a cool story. We were handwriting data back in 2017, 2018 from Rapsodo pins and from plyos. And what we saw is we were handwriting data. We kind of wrote it in this structure that would escalate the velocities of certain pitches. And so initially it became a velocity thing, climb the mountain. And we were focused on trying to overcome the data, trying to get that data to scale a little bit upward. But then over time, it kind of became this like mantra. I started using the graph, the emoji graph, the upward trend. We started sticking it on some gear, like our wristbands, the rubber wristbands that guys wear. And it became a mantra. It's just, today, what does that mean? Climb the mountain. If you guys hear me say that or see us hashtag it, it's true from the heart. We really want you guys to climb the mountain from whether it be your career, starting off at a young age and building up all the way into, the collegiate or pro level, or just overcoming that next hump. That's what we want you guys to focus on. We just want you guys to climb, keep working, be relentless, step forward every day, get after it, and continue to take that next step in your career toward your peak, whatever that may be. Everybody's got a peak. Could be professional baseball, could be the Hall of Fame, might be, a collegiate level, might be high school, whatever that is, be the very best at what you do, and keep climbing. So that's our hashtag. Brady, appreciate you. I think you should change your user handle, but that's okay. We'll talk about that later. So hashtag climb the mountain. That's our mantra. Appreciate the question. Let's move to the next question here. These are a lot of fun with Garrett in house, obviously, because he gets to answer a lot more of the strength questions. So maybe we'll save some of those for next week. Got a couple of you guys that hit us up on email this week. I'm pulling this one up. Oh yeah, this one's a good one. So the question this week, it was, what is chronic workload? So you guys have heard me talk about workload management a lot, and workload management, it's kind of like our bread and butter. It's a thing that I've been working with, since 2016. So lucky to have been involved with the Modus team and the Modus lab back at that time. Ben Hansen, bringing me along and kind of introducing this idea, this concept of workload management. But workload management's messy. It's tough for some people to understand. You look at all these different metrics. You've got AC ratio and acute workload and chronic workload and one-day workloads and from the onset, for a lot of guys, it's tough. Even guys that have been doing this for a while, we have a really great process, I feel like. So a lot of guys are able to do the process, but maybe not always able to explain what these metrics mean. So when we talk about chronic workload, understand, like I said, there's different metrics. You have acute workload, you have chronic workload, you have AC ratio, one-day workload. Let's just narrow in and focus on chronic workload. Obviously, that's the question. Chronic workload is your fitness level. And so I'll explain chronic workload like this. Imagine that I was preparing for a marathon. Okay, we'll use the running example again, right? So I'm preparing for a marathon. I haven't done any running. Okay, I've done no running. So my chronic workload right now is a 0 because I have no fitness level built up. I have not been training. I have no load that's been on my body that's allowed me to prepare for that running, that long distance running, right? So in week 1, I'm going to run 1 mile probably, right? And then maybe week 2 or a couple times in week 1, I might run 1 mile. Then week 2, I'm going to progress up a little bit. Week 3, I'm going to progress a little bit more. Week 4, I'm going to progress a little bit more. We look at running that way and we say, okay, if I have 6 months to build up, I can be ready for that marathon. Reality is what chronic workload is we're sampling one-day workloads on average over the last 28 days. So what that means is that imagine if I ran 1 mile every day for 28 days, right? Or if in this case, my throwing workload, my one-day workload was a 1 every day. That's like 2 throws. But let's say my throwing workload is like a 1 every day. My chronic workload, if I sample the last 28 days, would be a 1. That's the average, is 1. So chronic workload just represents your fitness level and how much you're built up to handle. And then your 1-day workloads represent that accumulative day load. And we can start to put together programs that have these varying 1-day workloads that, if we extrapolate out 4 weeks back, we start to determine what your chronic workload is, and we can progress off of that. So, we know that guys in season, like big league starters, they have about a 15 chronic workload. Some of the schools that we've worked with, I use a good example. Michigan is a great example. Steve Merriman does an amazing job with those guys at Michigan. Their chronic workloads this fall, all of their guys somewhere between a 10 and a 15. So they've done a really good job. Most of those guys throwing somewhere around 3 innings and kind of getting to their fall structure, just like most are. Done an amazing job there. So chronic workloads, that measure of understanding how do I manipulate my weekly structure, or my 9-day structure, and my routine. And if I want to get more chronic workload, I just need to start to slowly progress my way up with more throwing. If I want to decrease my chronic workload, I slowly start to decrease. So when we talk about like deloads, or we talk about like certain phases that we talk about, those microcycles, chronic workload is a great place for us to look to determine, are you ready for this microcycle? Are you ready for a velocity phase? Are you ready to throw in games? Chronic workload is the one thing that we look to because it represents your fitness level for that. So for those of you that maybe don't wear a sleeve and are trying to track your workload, I highly recommend getting a sleeve. You can do that through us, whether it be remote or in-house training. We manage and monitor all of our athletes' throws every day, every single throw. So something that we can definitely help you with if you're looking to improve your measurements, you're monitoring this offseason, looking for a plan to determine when you're ready for some of these things. So with that being said, awesome question. What is chronic workload? Maybe we'll do an inside the metrics on that, and I'll do a little deeper dive with some visuals here in the near future. I think that might be a good one for us to go to. But with that, we will wrap it up tonight, and we'll move forward to our last segment, of course, called The Wrap. So I want to finish up tonight. And number one, solo recording is not as fun. So Garrett, I know you're watching. So solo recording is not as fun as having Garrett here. So maybe we'll bring in some new team members this offseason, bring some of our pro guys in to help us record a little bit. Garrett, appreciate you and appreciate your work as a co-host on this thing. Garrett will be back next week for you guys to answer some of your strength questions and to dive a little bit deeper into some of these things. But want to finish up tonight on the wrap, talking about that off-season structure right now. A lot of you guys reaching out, wanting to get involved with us, wanting to get started up on a program. I know fall's ending for many of you, whether it be remote, whether it be coming into a facility. The one thing that I want to just reiterate to you guys, please, 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 please do not take time off between your last games of fall and that winter period. If we only have a month with you, we have to maximize that time. Pro guys, come see us with an exit pin before you completely shut down. High school guys, same thing. Some of you guys have showcases and stuff, and this is a really convenient time for many of you guys to shut down, stop throwing. We just recommend for you guys to continue on, get to us. Let's build up a plan together, make sure that we get you guys to the off season safely and prepared for what's ahead. But with that being said, that is the wrap tonight. Reach out to us on support at KineticProBaseball.com. If you guys have any questions following tonight or want to get started up with an assessment, and if you guys can go through our website, KineticProBaseball.com, to schedule your assessment. They go on Wednesdays and Saturdays right now. So many of you guys are hopping in there. Appreciate you guys jumping through the website. But with that being said, I am out tonight. This was fun. Looking forward to having my co-host back next week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it this week. Following up, moving forward, our recordings will be on platforms, YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, Instagram. So if you guys want to check out some of these moving forward with Community Live. They are every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be hitting you guys with another episode of Community. So appreciate you guys. Keep climbing. We'll see you guys next week.